Good day, everybody. You want to see how the Liberal Party is getting rich? And all of your politicians? Let's pay attention.
I want to talk about Part 4, Division 1 on the Canada Growth Fund. And I have some concerns about that section of the bill. It's going to provide $2 billion to you as minister to buy shares in a corporation which does not exist. There's no legislation which tells us anything about this yet to be created corporation. We don't know anything about the composition of the board or even whether there will be a board. There's nothing to tell us about the financial controls that will be exercised over the $2 billion. And there's nothing to indicate what the governance structure is going to be.
Do people really think this is the first time they've done this? She is willing to buy shares into something that doesn't exist. Why don't she just open up the business and get $2 billion and give it to herself? This is how the Liberal Party is getting rich. Do you think the toy boy Justin Trudeau isn't doing the same? Come on now.
Equally concerning, there's a section there in that part of the bill that says that the $2 billion isn't the most that's going to be paid out. It leaves it quite open that there could be future monies coming out of the consolidated revenue fund.
Hey, so why don't we just give over $1 billion to an organization that she's willing to put shares into it? The finance minister of Canada.
And there's no limit on it. So what I don't understand is why, if you're going to establish a fund with money of that magnitude, why isn't there a separate bill which would outline the specifics of the company and also what the company is going to do, what the mandate is, what the objectives are, what the board composition is going to be. So it's really concerning to see $2 billion going out with an explanation. I think there were 17 lines there, and it leaves it quite open that additional monies can be paid out of the consolidated revenue fund. So why is there not a separate piece of legislation?
So it's going to be taken out of the revenue fund and given over to herself. Wow, that's pretty good. I want to be finance minister too. I wonder if Jim Flaherty did the same for the Conservative Party.
Well, thank you for the question, and thank you for focusing on what I actually believe is one of the most important elements of this. Was introduced in the budget and elaborated on in the fall economic statement, and something that I see as one of the most important elements of our green transition.
I'm sure it is. If I wanted $2 billion for a green transition to come to myself or anybody I want to give it over to, I myself would want to put shares into that.
The Canada Growth Fund will actually be capitalized at $15 billion, and the objective is for that government.
So she gives over the amount, $15 billion. She wants to give herself from the revenue $15 billion of our taxpayers' money, and wondering why she doesn't care if she gets reelected. I wouldn't care neither.
To pull in private capital at a ratio of at least 3-1. It will be managed by professional.
Oh, I'm sure the revenue will be 3-1. It'll be 20 million put into it out of that 15 billion. The company will go bankruptcy and she will never worry about a thing again. Welcome to Canadian politics of them bankruptcying Canada.
We understand that we need to have actual investment professionals do this work.
So she's going to hire these professionals herself and give this money over to herself. Wow.
To do perform some very sophisticated jobs in the green transition, including contracts for difference, which we are hearing from investors in Canada and outside Canada.
To a company that does not even exist. You heard the lady say this in the beginning. It doesn't exist. She is an imaginator like Barney the dinosaur.
A really important element to ensure that people have the confidence in our carbon pricing system to invest in it. And I'll just add one more thing. I do want to hear your next question, Senator. But to the question of why are we doing it now, I would say to you two things. One, the green transition, we have to act quickly. But from my perspective, the Biden administration's Inflation Reduction Act.
So you want to go buy the American Joe Biden presidency to give yourself over $15 billion to react for you to claim bankruptcy.
Added to the urgency with which Canada needs to act, they are deploying hundreds of billions of dollars to invest in the green transition. We need to move really, really fast. And so getting this fund in place quickly is more important than ever.
But Minister, you can't put the fund in place. You're saying, give me the $2 billion, I'll buy some shares, but the company doesn't even exist. The company doesn't exist, and you're giving us all this information verbally. If that's the mandate of this soon to be, or this corporation you're talking about, why isn't it in the legislation? I mean, we're looking at this, there's 17 lines there to justify spending at least $2 billion, and then it leaves it wide open for there to be additional appropriations coming out of the Canada Revenue Fund. Like, I'm just very, very surprised to see it. $2 billion with no explanation within the bill over how the $2 billion is going to be controlled.
Well, that's because they have plans of $15 billion. If you would have listened to what she's saying, you're only considering the $2 billion. She wants to take 15. I heard her say it. Come on, lady.
The company's not even created, and what are you going to buy shares in? There's no company yet.
Senator,
she's going to create the business herself and bankruptcy the business like they all are doing. I'm sure Trudeau has so many of his friends and family members doing this. You can imagine how many of the people from other countries are doing this right now. Do you think that pandemic money isn't missing? Wow.
You are one of the most precise and best, you're one of the most precise questioners I face, and have a very, very strong financial background. And I really appreciate that. And I think that scrutiny is important. What I would say in terms of the Canada Growth Fund is what I hear from Canadians and from Canadian businesses, especially in wake of the Inflation Reduction Act, is Canada has to move fast, and Canada has to move faster than we have hitherto. So we are moving quickly to structure the Canada Growth Fund. We're going to be fully transparent in how we stand it up, and details are going to...
And the company will be made out of nowhere, billions of dollars going into something that is nowhere, of a company made out of thin air, and you wonder how the Liberal Party is stealing billions of dollars and never answer a question.
Forthcoming in the coming weeks and months. But I really believe, given the hundreds of billions of dollars that the U.S. is deploying, we cannot allow the U.S. to suck all of that investment south of the border.
Part 4 of Division 1 should...
And I like to remind her that the Republicans take over as of January 4th of the Judiciary Committee, and that means they also have control of the Senate. I don't know what she's thinking is going on, but all this fraud coming from the finance minister wanting to steal $15 billion to a company that does not even exist, wants to make it out of thin air, and wants our taxpayers' dollars. And how many fake businesses have been created out of thin air and money got in to other pockets? How do the rich stay rich? This is how they do it. And where is the media covering the story on this? Well, they're too busy asking for a raise. The fraud does continue.